Welcome back to the overnight edition of From Day One. Art Bell and Albert Taylor are with us to take us through the overnight with open calls about out-of-body experiences. So with further ado, here's Art Bell and Albert Taylor.
So I can record it on a recording device. So that's one of my favorite ones. Another one is that it's very small, and it's semi-autonomous, where I can control it via remote control, and while it's in the particular location, I can send it a program where it will go into autonomous mode and start patrolling and recording data on its own. So those are the kinds that I've been using over the years, and they have collected data.
That is so totally cool. It really figures somebody who worked on the U.S. space program would do what you're doing if they moved into the paranormal, and you've done it.
Well, think about it. I remember when I was at Langley, and they have a really awesome museum there. I think it was Voyager. They have a model of Voyager there. And it made sense to me that we used, because I've been in the space program for a long time, I was even on a design team of GPS, when we just had it, didn't have it in cell phones, just the military was using it. So I've been in the space program for a very long time, and it didn't make sense to me that the paranormal was another unknown, and for the unknowns outside the Earth's atmosphere, we use probes. So it made perfectly good sense that to use a probe for the unknowns that are here in the paranormal community, and they're not afraid. They don't run off. They don't guess at what it is. They don't have desires on what they want it to be. They just record data. And that's the part that was really intriguing to me. And I wanted it to be autonomous, so I programmed it to think for itself.
And they really would stay there until Bigfoot crushed them.
It probably would, but the video footage you'd get would be incredible.
Yes, it would. And that's the whole idea, I suppose. Look, we've got 1 million phone calls. People want to talk to you, so let's give it a shot here. First-time caller line, I think Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh, that's me, Art.
It is.
My name is Mike. Boy, it's a thrill to talk to you, and especially tonight with Dr. Taylor. I'm trying to make this brief.
Thank you.
I've drove trucks for many years, and around 2000, I went to nights, and a couple coworkers told me about the Art Bell show. But not long after that, you had Albert on about Soul Traveler, and as a child, many years, I had the opportunity to fly around and out of body, and I didn't appreciate what it was at that age. And it had stopped for a couple decades. And one of the things you had mentioned on our show back then was the sleep, disruption, which of course going to nights did. So I started having them again, and I was thrilled that just like Art, kept popping back.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. I love to hear that.
Okay, if you have a question, sir, please go ahead.
I wanted to tell you, as a cat lover, Art, you like this. I had a young cat that loved to, basically I had an out-of-body where I interacted with my kitten. It was very bizarre. I was home, and the cat always wanted to be picked up and put up above closets in our bedroom. Anytime I got up out of bed, he would beg or jump up and want to be picked up, and that was something we did. So I was laying there, I went out of body, and I was trying to keep calm. I had this presence of mind, like you said. I'm floating, and we had a canopy bed, and I'm thinking, man, I'm going to go through this canopy. Right at the moment I look down, I see my cat asleep at my legs, and just like in an old ghost movie, I saw his spirit. He looked up at me, and he kind of separated, and he reached up, stood up, and tried to put his claws on me. And I'm freaking out because it's like those old hot air balloon movies where you're trying to just, I was trying to stay calm, and sure enough, we both popped back. I woke up, I lifted my head, and he was asleep like nothing had happened.
All right, so you're saying that you and your cat both had an OBE. One good thing about it, if you get scratched out of body, when you come back, you're all healed up, right, Albert?
Yeah, and no cat fever. No astral cat fever. That's an awesome, of the things that used to happen to me when I would leave my body is I had a German Shepherd, and he would be under my window, and the moment I detached and started floating upward, he would start barking like crazy.
Really?
And then when I would return to my physical body and reconnect, he'd stop. And this went on almost all night. So animals are, it's probably very normal to them to sense these subtle energies, of one of which is our astral form, and it's probably no big deal to them because they're born into that ability and see it all the time.
No, they don't have the hang-ups we have. Let's go to outside the country in Harmony. Where are you, Harmony?
I'm in New Zealand.
New Zealand, okay.
I'm in the top of the South Island.
Okay.
I've had quite a few out-of-body phenomena in the last couple of decades, or even longer than that. But I had one that was particularly profound, and I thought I might share it with you. We were actually talking about astral projection, and my friend said, "Hey, well, if you want to astral project, first thing you do is connect your consciousness to something that you perceive to be outside of yourself."
Mm-hmm.
So I was walking through the woods. This is up in Bellingham, Washington, years ago, and I thought, "Oh, I'm going to try this." Beautiful day, and I see a tree, and it's about 20 or 30 yards away from me.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to astral project to that tree over there for starters. So I stood still, and I thought, I am the tree. The tree and I are one. Hello, tree. And right when I thought that, this bird flew up and landed right by my feet. And it just sat there. And it must have been there for half a minute or longer. It didn't identify me as being anything other than a tree. And it was such a profound experience right then, because I realized that was what the power of it was.
So you were, for a moment, you were a tree.
I was a tree, and the bird saw me as being a tree. And that's why there was no fear within this little bird. As soon as I began to think, oh, hey, maybe I'm St. Francis or something, I'm going to go pick up the bird, whatever, the bird flew away.
That is so cool. I really appreciate that story. That's amazing. So you can, in essence, make yourself.
I think he identified so much with it. His consciousness could project and identify with the tree, which is a living thing.
Yeah.
Is that the bird, which has senses that I don't understand fully, was able to did not perceive him as a normal threat as they do in humanoids generally.
So to the bird, he was a tree?
He wasn't a threat, let's say.
He wasn't a threat.
He wasn't a threat or something to run away from. It was just another part of the environment. That's interesting. That's really fascinating. But I have some friends who are animal whispers or whatever you want to call them. And I have seen some things that I cannot understand on how they can connect with dogs or cats or even wild animals, lions and things like that, and they don't harm them, and they have this connection. And I don't understand that, but I think it's just another talent that the soul has to connect with this environment.
Right. And by the way, while we're on the subject, that's really what this is. I mean, would you certify that more or less that what we're talking about is that thing called a soul that is actually leaving the body?
Definitely, because it would be, I think we would be very in error if we thought of ourselves as the physical body and just the humanoid being. There is something far greater than that is made of stardust, let's say, because we're like star children, and so is everything else around us. So we're not separated from the physical and animal things in our environment. We're connected to them. The only thing that separates us that I've noticed is when we take a fearful stance, and that brings in a whole other set of circumstances. But we're connected to everything around us.
Well, that sounds wonderful to me, but, Doctor, I can imagine the human brain as complex as it is, being able to project itself with what we are talking about as an OBE, without it necessarily having to be what we traditionally call the soul. And we don't understand certainly everything about our brains. They're incredibly complex, and frankly, we don't know. Doctor, hold on. Sorry, I don't mean to be drifting away from this, but why couldn't the human brain do this without it being what we classically call the soul, which is a religious thing, kind of, sort of, right? Don't pay any attention to me. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Midnight in the Desert is a wild trip across the Days Divisor. Get your ticket to ride by calling 1-952. Call ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
Dr. Albert Taylor is my guest, and he's a very patient man. And these are very, very difficult things to talk about. You are. I can imagine, I guess this is what I was trying to say, I can imagine that our brains might have the capacity to project the self without necessarily projecting what we think of classically as the soul. But you would argue with that, I'm sure, Doctor, right?
Well, okay, let me explain. There's a couple of things that I want to share with you. Is the difference between spirituality and religion is the difference between being human and being an American. You are a human no matter where you are. You choose to be an American. That's the difference. You're a spirit no matter what you choose. You can choose any religion you want, but you're a spirit, basically. This is the thing. I started off with a bunch of questions. I wanted to know, why is this happening? Why, if it's just an intellectual brain experience, then why, I've been a member of the International Association of Near-Death Studies for quite a long time. And I've taught 8 million people have had near-death experiences in the United States alone. So why, when some of these people suffer the body that they're occupying suffers a physical death, and everything goes to zero, and then they come back, how come, if it's just the brain, now they can't wear watches because watches stop? How come light bulbs blow out, don't last as long as they should? How come when they go to the grocery store, cash registers malfunction? If it's just the death of a physical organism, none of those should be happening. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't happen every time with everybody, but if you look at 8 million people, you're going to have a higher number that has these difficulties. How come a friend of mine who was diagnosed with cancer 15, almost 20 years ago, was given 5 years, and had a near-death experience, how come her cancer, she's in remission and she's still alive? Because her awareness, according to her, has changed on who and what she is. I can't answer those by just looking at the brain.
Doctor, you don't affect cash registers, do you?
No, I haven't had a near-death experience, but I have talked to people who do affect electronic devices, who can't wear watches because the watches actually stop.
Right.
Who bulbs do blow out. It happens. It happens quite a bit, and it's happened years and years ago, and it's happening now. So if we're just machines, organic machines, that doesn't make any sense that we should be able to affect these items.
Well, I was going to say, if you are that kind of a person, they should keep you the heck away from the shuttle with a million moving parts. All right, let's try the first-time caller line up in Victoria, BC, I think. Hello?
Hello. Yeah, I love the show, and I'm really interested in the subject.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just wondering, like, when you're in a very deep sleep, and do you think it's possible that you start seeing things that you can't remember, and that would cause you to react? And my wife said sometimes when I fall asleep, and I'm in a very deep sleep, I start to scream.
Oh.
Definitely. Well, let me give you an example. How many times have you had a dream where you didn't remember the dream till maybe days later when something triggered it? Well, that memory of that dream was inside of you somewhere, but it took some outward stimulus to trigger that. So yes, you can have a dream, and I don't think that dream is just dormant. It could have some type of effect on you when it's triggered by some type of physical stimulus. So yes, I do believe that is possible.
Okay.
All right. All right, then. Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. Take care. And people from all over have questions about this. Let's try Kurt on Skype. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Bell.
Howdy.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Dr. Taylor. I wanted to tell you about my out-of-body experience / near-death experience. I was about 12 years old, and my brother and I, Scotty, were horse playing, and I was sitting on a chair on the back porch here, about 20 feet from where I am now, and he began to choke me really bad, and just kept choking me, and I fell out, and I was out of my body. And I didn't just see a light, but everything around, my vision was light. And, I was out of my body. I was not physical, but, all of a sudden I started seeing like 10 or 12 people, and they were in this light, and they were all praying really, really heavy. Imagine 12 or 15 people just praying continually. And I knew them. I'm thinking they're like my great-grandparents and my great-greats, but I can feel just the love, and that I knew them, but I didn't know them, but they were praying me back. And within about, I don't know how long it was, but I just saw all of these angels and love, and I knew all of these people. I could see their bodies, but just in this huge light, and they were all praying to me and praying for me. And before I knew it, when I came to, it was like coming out of this trance. I don't know how to explain it. It was, and I came back, and I began to cry because I realized what had just happened to me. I had just gone and seen something, and to this day, I think of that. And I forever now know that there is an afterlife, but I did know those people who were praying for me. That's just a forever memory I have, and I know that now, being that I'm 47, that was a piece of my life's puzzle to help me in my later years. To help everything I've learned since then, it all fits together now. But I know now for a fact that there is an afterlife.
Okay, well, I really appreciate the call, and I'm jealous.
I've heard children talk about their near-death experience, and they talk about a meeting on the other side, relatives, a grandfather who had passed away before they were even born. So him encountering someone he knew, but he had no conscious physical memory of them, is quite common. I have had a friend who suffered a horrible asthma attack and was rushed to the hospital. And during the process, when he was being placed on the gurney, all of a sudden he realized he had taken his last breath, and the pain in his chest was so intense, and all of a sudden there was a pop, and the pain was gone. And then the next thing he knew, he was standing outside of with this crowd of people who were looking at this guy on a gurney. And he thought to himself, what are you doing taking care of him? You should be taking care of me. But then he said, beings came up behind him, and this guy is not a spiritual person or religious by no means. And he said these beings came up behind him, and he said he knew them, but he couldn't think of who they were. And there was one particular one that was brilliant and wise and seemed like a parent type of figure. And that person said, you can go back if you want to, but you can't stay. And he thought about it for a minute, and then he realized, because of his eldest son, he wanted to return. And with that thought, all of a sudden he was back in his physical body, and the pain had returned, and they rushed him in to stabilize him. He called me the next day and told me this, and when I was shocked to hear this, because I know this guy, I've known him since I was a kid, and he said to me, he kept saying, but I didn't know. And I said, well, what didn't you know? And he said, I didn't know that somebody cared and they were there for me. I didn't know. It changed his life. He has never, ever been the same.
Good. All right. Let us try Chicago. I think you're on the air.
That's right. It's Chicago. Hey, Art.
Hey.
Hey, Dr. Taylor. I love your charisma, and I'm glad that you can still have a little giggle in between here and there talking about, this type of stuff. What I wanted to share with you guys tonight is that a couple nights ago I had a very, very vivid dream. So vivid that I woke up and I fell right back asleep and picked up pretty much right where it left off. And the thing that really boggled my mind the most was the fact that, a lot of guys get these dreams where we're about to have sex with a beautiful woman or a girl we're hot for, and we can never get back to that, or we get woken up. This was something that that's what
Actually, my experience has been that it never comes to a logical, or what should be a logical conclusion.
It never makes any sense, right? Exactly. But here, back to my story here. This dream was just so vivid that it messed with me. It woke me up with a feeling of like I had a cold. I was almost running a fever, and I went up, got some water, and took about a 5-10 minute break, and fell right back asleep. And pretty much I entered the same door again. And I don't really want to discuss the details of the dreams or involvements or what I do or anything like that. I am an Army veteran and, all that. It wasn't anything graphic of those lines, but it was a lot of messages, and it was stuff so weird. Like I was stuck in the same city here in the Loop in the Chicagoland area. And I was just going through doors, and I was having people giving me offers about, hey, you can live like this if you just this, and we're not doing anything wrong if you do this. And, I thought I left one guy that was looking at me all weird, and next thing you know, I just drive a block down, and he's standing at the bus stop again. And it just messed with me so bad. I have never had any type of dream like this ever in my life.
Okay, well, why did you mention you were in the military? Must have been a reason for that.
Because there's a lot of, we have a lot of, dreams related to PTSD. And I immediately, I threw that out because it was nothing completely at all.
I understand.
Anything related to the military.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd, get that out there. And what really got me was that it's just like it stayed with me till pretty much, maybe till about 3, 4, 5 o'clock the next day, where I finally, I got over it. I said, okay, I had this dream, but here we got Dr. Taylor talking about this type of stuff tonight, and I just thought I'd call in and,
Well, I'm glad you did, but what he's talking about is way beyond a dream, or even a restarted dream. It is very unusual to be able to restart a dream, but OBEs are a big step beyond either one of those. Right.
Well, you can't really use a light switch and say OBE dreams and click it on and off to either one, because it's more of a rheostat. You turn it up to OBEs, turn it down to lucid dreams, and you turn it down to just dreams. Well, because this seemed to be reoccurring, and a lot of dreams, maybe they won't matter. But there are some that affect you and get your attention, and those are the important ones. And what a dream can be is a form of communication, either from a higher aspect of yourself or from a consciousness that is external. And what's really important when these dreams affect you on that level, they aren't fleeting, is to document the dream. Because what I found is dreams are designed to give you a change in perspective on something that's going on in your life or the path you're following in your life. And when you have a change of perspective because of that, then you do different things. You're a little bit wiser maybe, or you make rational decisions. So it's really important to document the dream. You may not quite understand it, but it's like a piece of the puzzle. If you don't keep all the pieces, you never get to see the entire picture.
Okay. Going back to something Paula said, it seems to me that if you have a really sexy dream, we've already covered the fact they don't ever seem to culminate all the way, but if you have that, that's your body telling you that, yo, buddy, you haven't had sex in a while, and time to be thinking about that?
Well, that is on two different levels. It is on a physical level,
yes,
which allows us to, propagate the species. And then the sexual desire, sexual energy is on a non-physical level. And the thing about it, some people have sex in the astral, and sexual encounters in the astral. But the thing about it is, well, I don't think in the astral it's to to procreate, because I haven't seen any astral babies running around yet.
No.
But,
You're telling me, wait. You're telling me you can have sex on the astral plane, and if so, can you complete the act in the astral plane?
Yeah, you can. It's an energy thing.
Oh, man, I'm jealous.
More intense than a physical experience.
Really?
But let me share this with you, because it's something greater than what you think it is. A friend of mine had a near-death experience. She drowned and on a scuba accident off the coast of Catalina.
Yes.
When her respirator, her regulator failed while she was deep down. And so she tried to make it to the surface, couldn't, ran out of air, and the next thing she knew, she was floating above her body. She watched them recover her body, but during that process, she ended up entering into the tunnel that we hear so much about.
Yes.
And eventually, at the end of the tunnel, there was a light that she merged with and had a panoramic past life review, like Daniel Brinkley has talked about. During that merging process, the way she describes it, and she still describes it all these years later, as being orgasmic. So for her to have that sensation during that non-sexual situation and describe it the same way, I think is a hint to what that really is about, and it may not necessarily be all about what we think it is in the physical world.
Well, she must have led a really good life.
It changed her life. She dedicated herself to helping people who had near-death experiences to talk about it and develop different research.
I can imagine my past or my life review when I die, and I can imagine it in many ways, but none of them would I describe as orgasmic.
I haven't had a near-death experience, but it is really, really common. And especially when you first come out of your body on the astral plane, depending on what your focus is, that encounter, it is like an exchange of energy, but it is sexual.
I mean, after all, sex is a function of our bodies, right? It's a physical function. So you would take out of body.
Thing too.
Pardon me?
It's a consciousness thing too, because I was doing a little bit of research into this. Is no one that I've talked to could describe to me an orgasmic experience. You know what it feels like, but very few people can actually put it into words. So if you look at that, and then what she talked about merging with a higher aspect of something, be it God, Jesus, or her higher self, that it was very similar. So that leads me to believe that there is a lot more than just on the physical level, because it exists in multiple areas on the non-physical level, and it means something.
Okay, all right. Clint on Skype, you're on the air.
Hi there, guys. Hi there, Dr. Taylor. Couple things that I wanted you to touch on is what is your thought about getting into the out-of-body experience after a few drinks or what have you? I've had an experience where I had a couple drinks, and I'd practiced when I was young. I'd seen the Shirley Taylor or Shirley MacLaine movie in the late 80s. Around this. basically a handbook on it, an early handbook. I'm not sure who it was by, this little tiny handbook. And I got into it. And basically one night when I wasn't wanting to do it, it happened to me, and I lost all control of my physical, or of my astral body. I couldn't move my hands, couldn't move my arms. All of a sudden, I shot out a window, and I landed, shot out it was about 3 stories. I hit the ground. I didn't hit the ground. I almost hit the ground. I landed about an inch away, and then I just started shooting across this field. And I had no control, and as I was about to hit a building, I just woke up.
All right, so you had a couple drinks.
So I'd had a couple drinks, yes.
All right, well then maybe you were like the guy thrown out of the saloon, just through the
I had skipped across the lake like a rock.
Yeah.
No, the thing with any drug that's able to sedate you, alcohol or anything, there are some in its initial stages that if it relaxes you, that's one of the keys to having an experience. But if you add more to it, it can lead to the point where it becomes an inhibitor and actually keep you from achieving a conscious level. So,
Dr. Taylor, I've got to ask you about drugs like DMT, some of these really heavy-duty drugs that cause those kinds of experiences. What do you know, if anything? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Well, that many indigenous people and now a lot of modern people are having spiritual experiences with drugs. I think it was Timothy Leary had experimented with LSD in the past. And had spiritual experiences. Yes, it is possible. Is it preferable? No. Wouldn't you like to just be able to do it by practicing a few things that you don't have to worry about the law or damaging your physical body or something like that? You want to do it since it's a very natural part of our existence. You want to do it naturally because that way you can do it as many times as you want. But yes, people have reported having spiritual high consciousness experiences by using various types of drugs.
Okay.
I don't necessarily recommend it.
All right. Buffalo, New York. Hello there.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I was just taking an allergy pill. You caught me off guard. Dr. Taylor, I have a question for you as far as, hello, Art.
Hello.
You spoke to me earlier.
Hello.
I think I had an out-of-body by the way you're describing it, but I'm not seeing light and I'm not floating over my body. I can reach the point where I go to sleep and I relax to the point where I feel, it only happened once because I've stopped a few, where I feel like I'm actually separating and then my body is gone and I'm all consciousness. But I'm never in the light. It's always dark. So this one time that I left my body, I asked for familiarity. So I asked that my grandmother come to me, and it took some doing. She with no body. I felt like we were holding hands and we were floating, but yet I'm all in my head, consciousness, but no body. And I said, I'd like to see Daddy. And she says, I don't know if you can go there. And I said, well, let's try. And she says, all right. So she dropped me off at some place, and that's where I started seeing things. And I was in a holding center, like a room, and I had to ask for my father to come out from wherever he was, and he was escorted so that I could talk to him. And in this room, there were open, wooden windows, but it was like 6 or 8-sided room I was in, and they were persecuted souls. They were not in a good place. I could feel that. So when my father came forward, my father says, "How did you find me?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" I says, "I've been trying to, I've been meditating and I've been trying, to get in touch with you for a long time." And he says, "I can't believe you found me." And
that description almost sounds like you were visiting somebody in jail, and the guards brought him out for you.
I kind of feel like it was purgatory. It wasn't hell, and I knew I was protected because I know how to protect myself, to keep myself protected because I dream a lot. Family members. I knew I was protected, and I was telling other people, ask and you shall receive. Ask for help. God will give you. He'll send you helpers. But when my father came forward, my father had said, again, how did you find me? I told him, and I said, well, he says, I said, how are you doing? He says, not good. And I said, well, what about the prayers? And he said, what prayers? I said, are you kidding? I said, Mom, and I take, we say prayers for you all the time. He said, I didn't get them. I said, well, ask for them. They're there for you. And he said, he held on to me, and I turned into like a little girl, like 8, 9 years old. And he said, I can't believe how, you'll never know how much you just helped me. And I said, well, good. And as soon as that happened, I was leaving, and I said, oh, I don't want to leave. And it was like, well, you have to go now. And I was back in my body.
That's an amazing story on so many levels. Really an amazing story. Thank you.
I've encountered this place that's very similar to her.
Really?
To me, it seemed like, oh yeah. And the thing is that there's buildings and places or locations that I think are constructed to make us feel comfortable. I don't think they're necessarily real or anything like, but it makes us, because we'd be very disoriented if all of a sudden we're snatched out of this situation and placed in a situation that had no up or down and no walls or all that. So I think those are designed to give us some type of reference. I visited this place where it seemed like a halfway station to me. I remember thinking it was like a bus station. Like outside one door, there was the no coming back portion, where whatever was out there, once you left out that, you would not be coming back. And then there was another portion where there were people who, she mentioned persecuted, but in my experience, they were traumatized by their life experience. And this was a place where they could recover before moving on. So I had a similar experience and that I've never told anybody about. So I think it's really interesting that she described something that was very similar to something that happened to me.
Wow. All right. Way short on time, but let's jump to first-time caller line in Las Vegas, Nevada, over the hill. Hi.
Hi, Art. This is Mike. I hate to bring this up, but you talk about violence. I'm familiar with ACT, and that's why I picked up the projection. But
you've got some noise going on there in the background.
Oh, excuse me. I found myself being, in different situations where I've actually had to project myself into a, how do you say it, subjective individual.
You're talking about out-of-body experience and violence?
Yes. If you could address that a little bit.
Okay, and violence has been done to you out-of-body, is that right?
Oh, my goodness. I grew up with it, you know what I mean? Like you was talking about past, and, I mean, all your friends are like that. That's what you know. It's the way I grew up.
I guess. All right, let's talk about that. Thank you very much. We're short on time, but Dr. Taylor, violence in an OBE.
Okay, well, I have to say negative experiences, because violence is just maybe one part of it. There are negative experiences, even painful experiences, meaning that you feel pain in the experience, but when you come back, you're okay. It happens. It used to happen in the beginning of me on the lower levels of the astral plane. I mean, I felt pain when I came back. I was surprised there was no physical damage. So I do, but it's intense. So there are some negative encounters to be had initially, but as you get better at it, there are places far beyond where those negative encounters would have happened.
You know what, buddy? You've changed your tune a little bit over the years.
Well, I have to say there are some negative experiences.
Well, that's what I mean by you changed your tune, because years ago you said, no way, there are nothing negative ever happens, and if it did, you'd snap back immediately. Hold on, Dr. Taylor. I got to call you on that one. Years ago, it was safe, it was safe, it was safe. Remember? So obviously in the intervening years, you have learned something. I'm Art Bell. This is Midnight.
Changes are coming, no doubt. It's been a long time with no peace of mind, and I'm ready for the times to be better.
Take a walk on the wild side of midnight. From the Kingdom of Nye, this is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL. Art.
It is the wild side of midnight, no question about that. My guest is Dr. Albert Taylor. Dr. Taylor designed things for the International Space Station, did that kind of work, worked on the F-17A, even the Star Wars program, and then turned his attention toward what we're talking about tonight and more. OBEs. Now, I said I was calling the doctor a little bit, and I am. When we first interviewed back in the 90s, I remember it so well, doctor. I was so fascinated with it, and I asked you again and again and again, it's safe, right? Oh, yes, always safe, never negative stuff, never, 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 never. And when I interviewed the second person, Preston Bennett, on this subject, I hit him with the same stuff. And you know what? His initial reaction was exactly the same as yours was. Oh, no danger. When I press him really hard, well, yeah, you could run into some negative entities over there.
Yeah, that. Remember, I told you though. I said there's a few things that could happen. That if you imagine a devil or a demon or something,
yes,
it's gonna manifest, because thoughts are things, and your thoughts create things, and it's gonna be the biggest, reddest demon that you've ever encountered.
Wonderful.
If you imagine that it's attacking you, and you believe that it's inflicting some kind of injury or pain on you, you're going to experience that pain.
Oh, great.
But it doesn't mean that something is attacking you necessarily.
Yeah, but doctor, I can imagine a lot of things. I can imagine God, and I don't see how you can imagine God in the good place without imagining the devil in the fire.
Well, it takes practice, first of all, but this is the thing, and I always tell people, if it exists, I'll just tell you, because I'm not trying to sway it either way. If it's negative, it's negative.
Yeah.
But now, if it existed on a permanent state or basis, I should encounter it periodically throughout all my experiences.
Yes.
That's how I see it. It's like a wild animal. It may not see me all the time when I go into the forest, but I should encounter it periodically. Well, I only encountered it in the beginning when I was fearful, when I was at the lower aspects of the astral plane and things like that. But after doing it many, many times and then developing a certain amount of confidence, and they cease to happen. So if it happened now, I would say, hey, even though you develop confidence, you could still have these bad experiences, but they haven't. So that leads me to believe that all the fear that I originally had, and the fear of the unknown, because I had a lot of it. I was a chicken, man. I like to call myself an astral chicken. I was scared, but I only had negative experiences when I initiated the whole thing through a position of fear.
This from a guy who would hold the camera until Bigfoot made soup out of him.
Yeah, now. Initially, it was scary. I didn't, I've watched every ghost movie Hollywood has produced. And I've seen if you encounters with ghosts, what happens, and it never ends up well. So with that knowledge, going into this unknown experience, I scared myself a lot of times.
Okay. Master Lex. What a name on Skype.
Thank you for taking my call. I actually spoke to you a few weeks back about, I think we were talking about shadow people.
Yes.
And it was. I felt like that at the same time that was along these same roads, whereas although you can see shadow people when you're awake, I often saw mine when I was sleeping. I would wake up and I would see them. So I'm thinking that maybe they were part of that, I guess, lower astral plane that Dr. Taylor was referring to.
Very good. Very good.
And,
I have never seen a shadow person, but I've seen spirits. But I would imagine, because my five senses aren't capable of detecting the non-physical beings that are around in that area, but I would imagine, and we're not all the same, someone who maybe turned up a little bit on the dial can sense this kind of thing. So if you turn up your dial to your sensitivity, I'm sure you're going to see images. They may not be clear, and they may seem to be darkened or whatever, or silhouettes, but I'm sure that is definitely possible. If you have when you have an out-of-body experience, your senses are turned up to maximum, so you literally dial in on the frequency that can perceive whatever is around you.
Oh, well, I'd like to keep my dial set below S for shadow person. Go ahead, caller.
Sometimes you're born turned on, I call it.
Yeah,
and you're just able for these things to happen. And I think that's probably one of the more scarier positions, is when it's just on and you don't know what's going on.
Right.
And you see these non-physical beings around you. That would be terrifying.
This is from a person who hit the jackpot genetically for all this. Yes, go ahead, caller.
Oh, I was going to say as well, I've had an astral, or I guess an out-of-body experience where I remember it extremely vividly, and what stuck out most, which some people might find shocking, was that I didn't have a body. I was this little blue orb, this light, in my bedroom. And as I looked around my room, it was like a 360 view. I could see all around me, but I could direct my focus on certain things in the room. And I noticed, particularly electronics, they had like this little aura around them. And I could move around my room, and I thought, well, I don't have a body. How do I move something, or how do I touch something?
Maybe as a little blue orb, you were seeing electromagnetic energy.
I think that is possible. And when I thought about trying to touch something, I actually manifested kind of this...
An appendage.
Blue hand. Yeah, an appendage, exactly.
Right.
So, and that was and of course, it was very difficult to concentrate. And so I think I immediately, eventually slipped back into my regular body or sleep state, whatever it was. But it was very interesting and extremely intense.
It was. I bet little blue orbs don't have much of an astral sex life. Doctor?
He just described it as our natural state. You are not your body, and you are not your astral body either. That's just something you wear when you're in the astral plane. You are something else that I had in the beginning a lot of times where I would leave the astral body and find myself in just like a spherical existence, and my vision was 360 degrees also. So that's your natural state. Even I used to drag around. I remember describing in my book, when I left my body, I moved around the bed, and I was dragging something deflated behind me. And when I left, it was, it sounds kind of gross. When I left, it was my astral form. So I was in three parts of me were in three different locations at the same time. My physical body was flat on its back sleeping. My astral body was kind of still clinging on to me, and I was existing as a spherical consciousness with 360 degrees of vision. So, that's your natural state beyond the astral.
All right, outside the country with Mario. Hello.
Hey, how you going, gentlemen?
It's going fine. You're probably in Australia.
That's right, I certainly am. I gave you a call last time about shadow people.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I've got a question for the doctor. I've had an experience where it's almost like you're not in a dream state, but beyond it. And I was curious to know, is it a common sort of... how can I explain? Is it common for you to sort of go dropping down through certain levels? So one that feels less murky and one that feels really nice and clear? Because the murky ones, like the dream state, almost feel like you're drunk in a way. Because it's just fuzzy.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's a range of consciousness meaning that you can be at a very low level and not perceive very much, not even be aware very much, and then that can be turned up, and there's a range in your environment. Because the astral plane, let me describe this. Imagine you had a beaker, a cylindrical beaker, and you fill that beaker halfway up with dirt, dry dirt. Well, that dirt represents the physical plane. Now you take some water, which the water represents the astral plane, and you pour it into the beaker. Well, as you go, after you fill it up, as you go from the top to the bottom, it's very, very clear where the water hasn't come in contact with the dirt. And as you descend into the beaker, it becomes murkier and murkier, and becomes thicker and thicker, and eventually becomes muddy. And then even though it's muddy, as you continue down through the beaker, there's some places where the water hasn't gotten to yet, and it's still dry. That very low dry level is where we are now on the physical plane. That's where we exist. But as you move up, the astral plane is partly here and it's partly beyond here. So as you move up in vibrational awareness, you move through those murkier areas of the astral plane to an area where it's very clear and you no longer can perceive the physical plane.
So you could kind of, in a way, have multiple occasions where you wake up multiple times, which is something I've experienced, where you wake up like 4 or 5 times in the same place and you just don't know what reality is, and it's actually really interesting when you get to that stage. But yeah, thank you for that.
Right. Well, a long time ago, one more thing to address that. A long time ago, one of the clues to having an out-of-body experience is that you may wake up more than once. You wake up into the dream that you thought you were already awake in. So remember, there's a duality of consciousness. There's the physical consciousness, and then there's the super consciousness. So those two things can interact and can feel like you wake up twice. You wake up into the super consciousness, and then as you come out of that, you return and wake up into the physical consciousness.
Okay. All right. Let's go to DeLand, Florida, I guess. Hello?
Hey, Art.
Hello.
Hello, Albert.
Hello.
I called in, Art, back when you had Preston on, and I had thanked you for getting me into this because I had heard Albert on your show.
Isn't it interesting that there are similarities with what they say?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the reasons I was trying to call back in to speak to Albert again. I've had a tremendous number of out-of-body experiences, but the guys with the hoods, I didn't know if Albert figured out who they are.
You're talking shadow people.
No, they're like sleeper guys.
No?
They're like watchers or something. I don't know. And the other thing, the higher self. When I've kind of requested to experience that, you have this at least I do. I get this like a swirling. I have a cold. Excuse me.
Sorry.
Get like a swirling, euphoric, intense tornado thing going on, and I don't know. It just gets so intense that I end up slammed right back in my body, and I never get beyond that. Whatever it is, I don't know what to expect beyond that when you hit that swirling euphoria thing, with the higher stuff.
Remember, it's kind of like you're all of a sudden you find yourself in the front seat of a car that's rolling down a hill, and if you don't take control, it's going to do whatever. It's going to bounce off the cars, and end up wherever the car ends up. So, and I'm not sure if while you were having this experience, you actually decided you wanted to do something. Generally, if you don't decide and you just kind of observe, anything could happen. That means you could see anything or you could experience anything. I've had a woman who'd never had a near-death out-of-body experience, and at 40 years old, she had her first, and it terrified her only because she found herself bouncing off the walls and everywhere. So, yeah, that happens if you don't take control. But know this, you can take control and direct if you can focus your thoughts, you can direct your experience in any direction you want to.
Okay, Thomas Short, Yorkton, Saskatchewan, I think.
Hey Art, I just wanted to have a quick share something with you guys. I had my first out-of-body experience when I was 12 years old. I was sleeping down in the basement, and my grandma, who was in a nursing home about 30 miles away, and I seen her come to me in spirit form, and I went and left my body spirit form, and she took me with her for a walk, and then I got introduced to some family members, which I never knew at the time, including my deceased aunt that was stillborn many years ago.
Oh my God. Well, how would you know? How would you know that?
Well, I'm getting to that. This is pretty cool. I had a guy in the military fatigues who I had no idea who it was. So fast forward to the next morning, my dad gets a phone call, found out Grandma died. Okay, so and then we went down to her where she was, getting cleaning stuff going up, and I told my dad that he had a sister that passed away, which was an aunt of mine. He goes, "You're full of it." Fast forward 2 years later, we go to a family reunion. My dad's parents were split up, and my grandpa was telling my dad that he had a sister that died between him and his sister. And he was just looking at me, glaring at me like totally crazy. And the guy in the military fatigues I later found out was my grandpa who died in the First World War. One of my great-grandfathers, actually.
Oh.
So, yeah, I wanted to share that with you.
On what I described earlier, where people have and children have met grandparents or great grandparents that died long before they were born. That sounds quite common, and I've heard that people having that experience before.
Maybe quite common, but it's astounding.
It is astounding.
Absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
Very quickly on stuff. We're almost out of time. Robert, are you there?
I am.
Okay, go ahead. Real quick.
Okay, Dr. Tyler, one question for you. When you reach the highest astral plane, is it possible you come in contact with something else that is in translucent color, such as yourself? You're a being. You feel like somebody is communicating with you, but yet, I hate to say this, but I'll say it this way: they're very metallic and almost glistening, and flying with you side by side, and feeling the same feelings and thoughts that you have.
Yeah, well, definitely. That's what I was hinting at earlier, Art, is that you think you're alone, but you're not alone. Now think about this. Imagine the astral plane being from on a dial from 0 to 10. And then imagine there's a higher frequency from 0 to 20. Well, imagine you only have a vibration, or your dial can only go up to 7. But another being's dial can go all the way up to 17. So they can come from 17 to encounter your realm, but you can't go up to 17 to experience theirs. But you can meet when they meet you at the lower levels. And your higher self is definitely with you all the time and will be with you to protect you in the encounters and guide you through the experiences that you have.
All right, my friend. My dial only goes to R now, not to S for shadow people. Doctor, listen, we didn't do it all by a long shot, so I'm going to have you back again.
I would love to come back, Art. I enjoy doing shows with you.
The program just goes like that. It's gone.
Yeah.
Man. Dr. Taylor?
12 hours used to go by so fast. So.
Thank you, my friend, so very much, and we'll do it again and soon, I'm sure.
You have a great evening, Art.
You too. Wow. Totally a wow. Whole subject is just awesome. Thank you all so very much, and we will do this again. In fact, we'll do it again tomorrow night. I've got a priest here tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about exorcisms. It's going to be really something. Until then, from the high desert, good night.
Thank you, and that was Art Bell and Albert Taylor from September 30th, 2015. That will bring us to an end as well as this final Mojo Brawl will go. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another and release the Krekens as we march along here from day one. Have a great night. Enjoy your good night's sleep. If you do have an out-of-body experience, please enjoy and let us know in the comments. And until then, have a great night. The show will end as soon as this fight concludes. Good night, everybody.